This story tells the story of a young man who is not only good at studying, but also an extraordinarily beautiful person. And that's why all the girls are just crazy about him. Every other girl knew a high school student named Wang, and she wanted to become friends with him. But each time the young man refused. The young man's heart belonged to only one girl, the queen of the garden among the school flowers, and the students of the whole school dreamed of meeting her. It may seem that he is a real lucky man, but in reality, he had to work hard to make his girlfriend happy. In search of a job, he knocked on the doors of many establishments, asking and belittling to take him as an employee even for the lowest paid position. Yes, the young man has an excellent grade, but he has an ordinary family. And the guy does everything he can and can't do to earn at least some money. But in today's world, it doesn't matter how hard you try to earn the money you spend on a date. In today's world, a man is ready to give his life for someone he appreciates and who will appreciate him in return. And a woman only adorns herself for whomever she likes. The young man is complex, so he can use it not only in his studies, but also in games. And he's also very naturally capable. The only thing he can't do is love. He played video games all night long, improving his score over and over again. Just like this evening. Today, after passing the test, the young man found out that he is the player with the shortest time. I also received a reminder that entering the post-apocalypse is life-threatening. This message did not alarm the young man very much, but on the contrary, it awakened a certain excitement in him, and he immediately wanted to know what kind of world it was. The reminder said that the entrance was life-threatening. If he dies in this world, he won't be able to return to reality, which made him think. Although there was a threat to his life, it was the game that aroused his interest. And also, the amount of his winnings depended on the time he would stay inside. Our confidence was shattered, and he decided that this time he would not be able to answer. So, having weighed all the pros and cons, I started the game. A new light window is displayed on the computer screen, informing that the young man has made the right choice. And now combine the moose system to continue. Next, the young man was presented with a set of rules that he had to memorize initially. For example, how to move things from the real world to the virtual world. The young man's eyes burned with more and more excitement as he carefully studied the rules and other details of the game. He had 4 hours left before the start, which meant that he had to hurry up to buy everything he needed. But the trouble is that his pocket is empty. The problem arose because he was on a date with his girlfriend last week, and so he would have to ask Li Ping for money. Computer games literally take over this world, so literally everyone around them does not stick to their devices for days and nights, playing and competing with each other. The two young men played quietly, arguing a little from time to time. But they were distracted by the sound of the door opening, forcing them to distract themselves. Wang Bing walked through the door, and the two young men smiled, as they were glad to see their friend. Immediately they began to be interested. For some reason he did not come for so long. It became a little uncomfortable for the young man, as his friends were worried about him. And he didn't come to see them, to borrow some money. The friends understand everything without words, so even without listening to the end, they began to ask the young man to at least eat well, and not spend all the money on the girl. The young man may be very smart, good at studying and playing video games, but his IQ undoubtedly drops in front of the sight of his beautiful girlfriend. That is the reason in spending a huge amount of money. Wang Bing was undoubtedly pleased with the generous help from her friends, but she was also worried about how they themselves would survive without funds. Not wanting to listen to any objections, the young people literally write their friend out the door. Since it's already quite late, this is an example of all the best friends who will follow you through thick and thin and check the copper pipes. And at the right moment, they will give a crack. But seriously, they didn't really understand everything and literally demanded that the young man go, so as not to make the girl wait and finally eat. The young man set a new goal, and that the moment when he finally became rich would definitely return all the debts to his friends. The training camp was completed in a fairly short period of time. And together with her tongue, the young man went to the right place. He had a sapper's shovel to help him in his treasure hunt. The shovel was a versatile weapon, as it could not only drip but also kill enemies. Before he went into the virtual world, there were things that bothered him in the real world, such as silence on the part of his girlfriend. From time to time I dialed it. I had already memorized the phone number. The young man heard only debts and an answering machine, which made me tense. And now, when he once again cut off the girl's phone with calls, she still deigned to pick up the phone, wondering what had happened. Deciding not to go into details, he only explained that he would be gone for a while, but hoped that he would return soon and they would meet. Lavushka, on the other hand, also had news, and judging by the tone, it was not very pleasant. But the young man only assured her that it was not necessary to say when he would return. The girl presses the end button and puts the phone down, turning to her interlocutor, who seems to be much nicer than the guy she was chatting with. The handsome-looking young man asks who called the girl and immediately puts his pen on the girl's thigh, remembering him. Deciding that the lie is for good, the girl, turning to her companion, says that it does not matter, and they can pick up where they left off. Wang Bing wasn't bothered on the floor, as his girlfriend had never hung up so unexpectedly before. However, now he has a completely different mission, and so he turned all his attention back to the virtual world in which he was going. The young man begins to turn his head from side to side, realizing that this is a real journey through time and space. Around him, he sees a dilapidated building, as if there would have been no one here long ago. And now he found himself alone and defenseless in it. Logically, if the young man finds himself in a post-apocalypse, then the Walking Dead must also be in this place. And the assumption will turn out to be correct, since literally behind the neighboring bars, a whole army of the Walking Dead was waiting for the young man. Excellent logic went in, reasoning that the young man had 7 days, and if he wanted to find anything, then he needed to explore this world. To say that you need to find out more and to do it, in fact, are two completely different things in terms of time and complexity. Well, he's got a lot more enthusiasm and decides he's going to be the guy in the game who explores this post-apocalyptic world. The first piece of advice he learned was to keep a shovel handy in case of a critical situation in which he had to defend himself. Also, the second light there was that you should choose the road with fewer Walking Dead, for safer movement. You should also keep in mind that when the Walking Dead are concentrating on something, they should not be distracted, otherwise they will draw attention to you. For example, in one of the areas, the Walking Dead were more active, sympathetic than in the humble alleys. It was necessary to take into account the fact that it was absolutely necessary to avoid completely unnecessary battles. The Walking Dead were very sensitive to any sound, even the biggest one, so it could be used as a distraction. If you follow all these rules, there was a post-apocalyptic world and nothing critical would happen. And so the young man will avoid the zombies and look for treasure to return in a few days. It would seem that everything is quite simple, but the feeling of persecution did not leave him, it would seem, from the very beginning of the game. There were different assumptions, even that it was some kind of intelligent kind of Walking Dead man that was haunting him. And here's the idea that it might not be the Walking Dead. And another person was like a scarecrow to him. Given that people in this world can be much scarier than even the Walking Dead, the right decision was to hide as soon as possible. Indigenous people or just people who have come here like him, no matter who, but nevertheless they may want to see him. If a young man dies here, he will not be able to return to the real world. This is not the best outcome of events. Human or zombie, it didn't matter. The young man definitely had an advantage in this area. Therefore, if he found shelter, he was ready to attack. He was alarmed by the fact that his pursuer was in no hurry to get up after him, as if she were expecting something. A noise rang out overhead, and as the young man raised himself, he expected to see his pursuer, but in his place he saw small fish flying at him. The face is hidden by a shadow, but everything else is visible. The handsome young man, abandoning the first assumption, decides that he is a fishman. A shiver runs through my body. It would seem that the game will end, and all the young man could do was spare me. The attacker turns out to be a nice girl. They say that if a young man wants to live, he must leave everything he has with him. The game began to look much more serious, as the girl was clearly not friendly and quite serious, continuing to threaten. The atmosphere around him was full of guns. Everything was still pointed at the young man, and the girl continued to demand that all the supplies be given to her. The assumptions were different. Wang Ben tried to analyze the situation as soon as possible. However, it was just a girl. The count had come to an end, and the girl was waiting for some action on the part of the young man, otherwise she would proceed to action. A sapper's shovel meets the girl's ball. Instead of attacking, it dodges back with deft movements. A light wind blows through the room, tearing off the girl's developing. And it would have looked beautiful if it hadn't been for all the seriousness on her face. Wang Bing is certainly a gentleman and doesn't attack first, but the girl dared to hit him first. And she even tried to rob him. The virtual world is much stronger than the real one, and the abilities in it are universal. So the girl began to scan her with our eyes. She was able to calculate both his strength and the points that needed to be struck in order to deprive the young man of these very powers. And the Peshiva boy means that the girl is very strong and perhaps she is a much more serious opponent than he previously assumed. A strong blow falls on the man's body when he comes into contact with the wall, and before I have time to catch my breath, I immediately receive another blow. The girl is still serious, declaring that if the young man moves even a step, she will immediately cut his throat. Something had to be solved at lightning speed, and the young man tried to offer a compromise. Since there is enough food in his bag for 2 people and they can work together. When she heard about canned meat and jerky meat, she shifted a little. Apparently, she hadn't eaten in a long time. Her eyes sparkled at the mere mention of it, and she drooled. Perhaps she was just crazy. It was a great chance for the young man, and he reached into his back pocket for another weapon. Thin hands began to crumple the shoulders of the young man even more. The girl kept demanding food. and apparently the feeling of hunger was quite strong. The entrance was for self-defense, and there was an electric shock, the discharge of which the girl received immediately. The girl, although she was very hungry, should not have attacked the young man with threats and turned around in an attempt to rob him. And this is not for the better for her. But the young man was not the most callous and ruthlessly understood that the girl was in the same conditions as himself, and he even felt a little sorry for her. After waiting for a while, he pulled out his backpack, some food and water put in front of the girl, which made her eyes run a lot. And in return, he does not ask for big rewards, only to say something, lay down a dagger to a girl. The water and food turned out to be quite healthy, nutritious, and also not expired, which surprised the girl very much. She was immensely grateful to this unknown young man, and the question arose more neatly, who he was and how to find him again. In the post-apocalyptic environment, the young man wandered in search of shelter, since people here are quite frightening than the dead. The fate of his playing path was clearly not sparing. And since it was only when he had settled down on one misfortune that he ran into another, the reason remains unchanged, but instead of a fragile girl, two healthy men appeared in front of him. Apparently, the commotion that unfolded with his girlfriend earlier attracted the attention of the rest of the players, which was very bad. The man began to brandish his weapon in an attempt to attack the young man and take away all his possessions. There were 3 attackers. They were approaching from all sides, which was problematic. For defense, the young man was in a disadvantageous position. "Man, I'm completely crazy. Crush or something about wanting to eat Wang Bing. The dinner looks too tasty." The young man, who had not yet lost his will to live, got up and threw the entrance to his weapon. You see a stun gun and a blade. Blood splatters swept before his eyes, and the young man was already able to injure several opponents, albeit not critically. Even a small wound was quite frightening to them, as the smell of blood attracted the walking dead. The men stood in a heap and tried to stop the bleeding and prevent the attack, and the young man, taking advantage of the moment, began to run away. Feeling like a bait for everything, the young man breathed as soon as he was freed from the tiger and found himself in a new lair. No less to survive the post-apocalypse was a very exciting action. Although it is not known where this experience may come in handy in the future, although it is possible that he will not be able to survive, since after a long walk through the territory, the young man found himself in a dead end. In addition to the impasse that appeared before the young man, the men who had previously attacked him returned to him. One of them was already making plans for the young man's arm, which he was going to tear off, and the other said that they would not hurt him at all. The man calls himself a gang of tigers' heads, which puzzled us, since he didn't expect to see a gang of bandits, and the intention to attack is getting closer and closer to you, and then the rescued early girl reappears. Well, the girl's plan was not to help the young man. The analysis was to observe how he, a green newcomer, coped with the difficulties that stood on his difficult path. And then he looked at the piece of food in his hand. It decided that gratitude would already help the young man to avoid death. The tiger's bows, without turning around, kept looking at the young man, saying, "What intrigues will they arrange for him at this time?" The girl quietly creeps up from behind. With a dull slap, one of the gang members falls to the ground, and pieces of brick are scattered around his head, with which he was hit. The girl, not stopping at one of the gang members, begins to strike at the others, gracefully maneuvering in the air between blows. A fragile, petite girl may seem masculine compared to her huge scores, but her fighting abilities are simply amazing. Yes, the men were quite strong and it was very difficult to defeat them, but the girl, clearly trained, coped with it perfectly. None of the professional fighters could defeat this gang, and it was simply unthinkable that a small, fragile girl would be able to injure them. In order to fully use her powers, the girl needs her dagger. So, turning to the young man, she asks him to give him to her immediately. It doesn't matter if they're friends or enemies, but it's better to die of each other than to be eaten by these crazy people. The man does not have time to strike back, as the girl's dagger pierces his neck with its sharp tip, letting the first drop of blood through. No matter how strong the Tiger Head Gang's abilities are against a sharp knife blade, they are still useless. The young man was already frightened by all this. Yes, cannibals, these people are terrible and deserve to die, but before his eyes, for the first time in his life, someone dies in this way. As the boss stepped forward, the other and painfully shocked, the rest of the group began to run away, fearing to be caught in the blade's edge. The young man's logic works perfectly, and they decide that you need to offend after the members of the group. Otherwise, they may get into trouble afterwards if they run away. But the girl protests, as now is not the best time and it is better to leave. The smell of blood really lures the dead, and those seniors approach the place where people were in a flock. Looking after the girl, I, a young man, reasoned something. After all, she turned out to be a good person, and perhaps she could be trusted. Even if he doesn't oppose her, she can be a good helper for the rest of his life. In the dark alleys, the walking dead were more and more in search of their next victim. In order to avoid death, The young people managed to find the secluded place just in time. Let's hide. Wiping the beads of sweat from his forehead, the young man breathed a sigh of relief, longed for an hour, and now he was finally safe. He turns to thank the girl, but she again warily points her dagger at the proudly young man. I order, stand still. The world is arranged in such a way that people who are quite unpredictable never know what they can do. You never know from which side betrayal creeps in, so the girl's fears are quite justified. The young man, again using his brother-in-law, decides that it is most profitable to do everything calmly and come to a compromise, if possible, of course. Accompanied by a gaze, the girl watches as the young man puts his stun gun aside, remaining unarmed. The girl was apparently still angry that he had used it on her and gracefully his leg in far away. The young man once again accepts an attempt to find a compromise, explaining that if they get along, the girl will get even more delicious food. And then he shows the girls the contents of his backpack with various goodies with nicknames and drinking water. And the bottom line is that if the girl helps him survive for 7 days, then he will share all his supplies with her. And then she literally drools and sheds tears, because so many things and at once for her alone, like some kind of dream. And the young man only mentally thanks himself for taking the most, so when, if he gives half of it, the girl will leave him enough with his head. The girl's eyes are watering even more, so apparently she met a local rich man, also wonders who he is. Oh, all the food here looks like an unprecedented luxury, even though it's just plain instant noodles and snacks. Of course, the young man could not say everything at once. But the girl only had to believe him, and sooner or later she would definitely find out. The goal is to stay here for only 7 days, and if he and the girl see each other again, then he promises, which will give her even more food. Before the young man gave the girl food, she planned to kill him, but he left her precious food and water, which no man would do. The young man did not force him to tell the truth, but nevertheless she offered him to make peace. Local rules were that he could not enter a girl's private room without her permission. In addition, he will have his own private room in which he can do whatever he wants, within reason. Having accepted all the conditions, the young man nods his head, says that it is time to get acquainted, and immediately introduces himself, asks what the girl's name is. The girl under the beautiful name took it, snorted, turning away, but the young man is not even offended. Since he understands everything, apprehension and some indignation. For these gloomy places, the room in which the young man managed to settle turned out to be quite spacious and rich. However, it wasn't that important. The windows are boarded up, but even so, it could be assumed that all the rich lived here. The thought of what could have happened to him with such a precious thing occurred to the young man instantly, and he began to look at the chests of drawers and cupboards, but they were empty. All I could find was a bunch of cobwebs and some rags. And a lot of time has passed. Apparently the others have already managed to turn the house upside down. But in one of the drawers he still managed to find jewelry boxes, and a young man really hoped that they were all real and worth hundreds of thousands. If you put all these jewels that one being found in a pile and sell them in one of the pawn shops in the real world, 3ATO, he will be able to become incredibly rich. There are no beautiful plans for life. They have already begun to flash pictures in his imagination. He will return to reality. He will get rich and marry the goddess and they will live in luxury. But in this situation, the best solution was to calm down, gather all the emotions in one pile and stick to the original plan. It was also worth wondering if all these things belonged to Xiao herself, since she didn't want to be mean. Leaving the young man's room, he was about to call the girl in order to find out the necessary information from her, but immediately stopped, frozen in place. Every word the young man uttered more and more quietly, the way the sight of and those standing with their backs to him reduced all thoughts to the background. At one point, realizing that he was staring indecently at the girl, he began to cover his face with his hands, and they say that he did not do it on purpose. Out of shame and embarrassment, he wound up his room, leaving the girl alone. Otherwise she kept talking about what the young man wanted. Through the closed door she began to imagine aloud what the young man wanted. He could not utter a word. The whole picture was frozen before her eyes. To gather all the young man's thoughts together, he had already said what he wanted to say earlier, hoping that the jewelry did not belong to the girl after all, and he would be able to take it. The girl enters the room, waving her hand, and explains that these things are useless. If he wants to, he can take them there. The young man looks at her with a sparkle in his eyes and asks her if the girl really means that he is just giving it to BF him. Slowly opening a box of chips, the girl explains that there used to be an elite area here, and each of the houses here is full of jewelry. But they are completely useless. And I don't know why they are needed, young men, but here I am lying down. He starts shouting that if there are still plenty of him here, then he should get them all. Xiao might have refused. But if you take into account the fact that the young man was literally gifted her with food, then she will help him when he finishes eating. The robbers of ancient tombs, young people went in search and were able to get quite a lot of various jewelry. The young man even considers arguing that they are all worth several $1 million. To earn that much money in the real world, he would have to work for an incredibly long time. He turns to the girl, asking if she is justified. She doesn't need all these things. And also, as if by accident, the girl remembers that there is also a very large safe in this house, which the young man may want to see. And then he jumps like the most satisfied animal, which has just been offered an expensive delicacy, asking to be escorted to the safe as soon as possible. The mudslide stood there for an incredibly long time. The girl, no matter how hard she tried, could not open it earlier. Therefore, all hope fell on the shoulders of the young man. Usually, such high prices in safes were connected to an alarm system that automatically alerted the police to several cases of incorrect code entry. But now, at a time when the electricity has failed, young people have enough time and opportunity to open a safe. It's kind of like a game that tests your patience when you sit for hours and methodically press buttons. After a long amount of time and countless times, the phrase I heard in a mechanical voice about the wrong code of the safe finally gave in and opened. It was impossible to describe the contents with you at once, because at the slaughter the young man saw bundles of money, expensive boxes, even more valuable contents, and bars of gold. What caught his eye the most was a beautiful necklace that shone like stars in the night sky even in the dim light. And it must have cost a fortune. The gold bars were also quite precious. It's just a pity that the money lying in meat bags doesn't circulate in the young man's real world. Even if they were useful for lighting a fire or rubbing his ass, he decided to unpack everything else in his backpack and take it with him. For hours, the young man sat looking at every pebble of jewelry he found, as if he really specialized in it. The girl, in contrast to multicolored gemstones and banknotes, prefers colored candies, which are successfully eaten by the one who lowered the package. The young man explains that at least the girl considers them useless. However, he has a way to make them worthwhile, after exchanging them for the delicious food that the girl loves so much. And again, the beady eyes of the girl are like with stars, so if she helps to find even more of these trinkets, she can get even more food. Perhaps you should think about whether the young man will see her again next time and whether the system will be able to hear what he is thinking. In his head, he hears a voice, as if someone unknown is asking his secret desires, and he does not lose the opportunity to begin to speak. His 7 days have expired and he must leave this place. However, I would like to know where he will be next time and when he will return to this world. To which the system explains that the next time the young man returns to the post-apocalyptic world, he will be within 100 meters of the place where he first appeared. I turn to the girl. He explains that as long as she continues to help her, our collection of gold and jewelry, he will continue to bring her all possible treats. Sweet Xiao at this moment could be compared to a satisfied son who received his long-awaited treat. The only thing missing was a ponytail that would make her wag with joy. One of our things that bothered the young man was the thought that I was exchanging snacks and gold stones. He was cheating. The girl explains that the city has almost run out of food, and the only food you can eat now is it, so it looks like dried rats. What kind of food? What did the young man bring? This is a real luxury. This one wonders why the girl does not sow the land, not build a strong circulating network. But as it turned out, the government had already managed to create several human colonies over the years. So this scheme is not the most reliable. The colonies are surrounded by high walls, heavily guarded, and zombies cannot get inside, which protects the water. All the lucky ones who manage to survive try to get to the places where people gather, but, unfortunately, very few get there, much less return from there. The government is working to solve the problem of the virus by developing the colony in essence and achieving self-sufficiency. Of course, you can build everything when you have absolute superiority of power, otherwise it is impossible to cooperate. Shifting the topic from politics and other matters, the girl is interested in what the young man will do, exchanging food for useless jewelry. And then what? Going further, he continues to convince the girl that he is a merchant from a faraway distant city and hopes that she will not ask unnecessary questions. Or he'll really need to figure out how to explain it. The girl still remains her own questions, saying that if the young man wants, she can take him to the right place during the day, but in no case should you go out at night. On the side of the street, a loud scream is heard. The girl jumps up, informs that someone must have fallen into the trap she set there. The nocturnal visitors turned out to be people from the Tiger's Head group. It was a terrible lot, and they all wanted revenge. Looking over the girl's shoulder and at the young man's street, he asks, "Is it this gang that attacked them today?" And also says that of kind of letting one of them go and they only gave themselves more trouble. The first most sensible thoughts were to flee from their hiding place and as soon as possible, otherwise the prospect of staying alive is slim. The main member of the gang asks the subordinates correctly, or if the place is not found, if this girl is here, then he will not allow her to escape punishment. He needs the girl alive, so he wants to deal with her on his own, while the young people watched the storm approaching them. In some mysterious way, the gang found out that the girl was here. So the danger now threatens not only her, but also the young man. Turning to the band, she informs them that they can't stay here anymore and need to go to another safe place. The road is again from the same dark alleys and streets of the girl. It would be good to say that the cunning hair has 3 holes. But the place they found themselves in is something more. Nevertheless, it could not be called completely safe on the ground floor. Words on sardines in a jar, swarming with zombies about to attack. It is impossible to sleep in such an environment, as all these terrible sounds made by the creatures frighten the young man very much. The stairs to the second floor have collapsed until they make too much noise. Zombies wouldn't be able to get up, but it was still scary. You understand that he needs to distract himself from bad thoughts and ideas. Playing on the phone seemed very exciting to him, so he took the device out of his pocket. The girl watches the video device, shocked, since her phone does not work in this environment, and also wonders if the young man has any music. The girl turned out to be a real music lover, and as soon as she heard the offer to listen to music, she clapped her hands and took one earpiece. It's true that music has the power to change people. It's like a girl gets headphones in her ears. She became completely different, all the more gentle and calm. The young man also shared this love of music, and when he was a little younger, he listened to the radio in anticipation of his favorite songs. And now he could share that love with someone. Then his favorite music sounded, the young man happily sang along, and sparks of happiness shone in his eyes. And sometimes they were just overwhelmed with emotions, just like the girl male. The girl remembered her childhood and listening to her favorite song. She smiled, and so did her family, filling their hearts with warmth. These are the very happy warm moments that cannot be replaced by any event in life, not by any wealth. But all of them pass sooner or later. The girl has never been able to come to terms with the fact that all these moments and close people who were close to her are long gone. Leave her alone, and I couldn't accept that they wouldn't come back. Like a long-lost friend who once came unexpectedly to your life and also at one of the moments unexpectedly left, taking everything warm and beautiful. It's the same with music. All the songs she loved, every note and every nice sound, they're all gone. But they all also shine in her heart. Tears run down her rosy cheeks. She turns to the young man sitting next to her, and his gaze is so warm and understanding, as if through his thoughts he could understand her pain. Returning one of the headphones, the girl says that it is not worth wasting the charger, saving it, and the young man does not care about why the girl cried. The music really brought the girl back all the days when she was with her parents, when she was little, a carefree girl and don't worry about the future. The young man began to understand that, most likely, all these years of being in this world, the girl must have suffered tremendously, going through all the events alone. I try to defuse the atmosphere. The young man again pushes one earpiece into the girl's ear, and the other tells himself that he wants to listen to this song with her. Another idea shines in his head, and he says that next time he will bring the girl her favorite music, as well as a mobile phone with several charged batteries so that she can listen there. This very insignificant kind gesture was really a big icon of the girl, and her heart began to beat faster. And my heart was not so heavy. The young man, looking into the girl's pretty face, began to notice that she was very sweet, and that his heart was beating frequently, and that I was not going to calm down. But still, now is not the time or place to indulge in a splash of feeling, emotion, and you need to control yourself. In addition, in the real world, he had a lover. Flipping through his playlist, the young man turns on Just Like Before, does not lean back. The walls say that everything already wants to listen to the song with the girl. They spend the whole night in a quiet, calm atmosphere. In the morning they still manage to fall asleep in each other's warmth. The girl's head rests on the young man's strong shoulder as he sleeps peacefully beside her. And the dead continue to walk around, these two of each other's safety. The young man looks at the thick map, listening to a girl who explains that Tiger's Head is one of the 4 largest banks in the city. They run the west side of the city, and the 3 men who attacked him yesterday are the most powerful around. And at that moment, they ran only because there were a lot of zombies around me. The gang leader's name was Tiger, and he had about 60 men, and they had about a dozen guns. So they're pretty strong. The base was located in the tallest building in the western part, a colorful garden that is equipped with a large supermarket. They took over this building and now own all the appurtenances there, so the possibility of revenge was reduced to 0. Since each man from the gang had a dozen pistols, which is quite a lot against 2 practically unarmed people. In addition to the Balanda and the Tiger, 3 other equally dangerous gangs have gained a foothold in the city, among them the most powerful gang of Wild Sands, located to the east of the city. Its leader has more than 100 men and 20 cannons, which is also quite dangerous. Next in strength was the giant Bear Bandana of the north,
the leader of which is the brother of Xiong. This gang is dominated by a variety of explosives, grenades, and the most powerful gang of flying eagles in the south of the city, with less than 60 men in the hands of a leader and everything withstood or so cannons. But they are stronger than all the gangs combined. Therefore, even if they are weak in numbers, 3 other gangs do not dare to provoke them, and in the end, 4 gangs are responsible for their part of the city. In addition to the 4 main bows, there are also a few leftovers, which were collected with pipes for a minimum number of people and weapons. Even if they don't have their own base,
they can live like the rest of them and move from one point to another southeastern city, and now there are less than 1,000. After listening to all the information that the girl laid out for the young man, he concludes that in a city in which there are less than 1,000 people left, you can call it post-apocalyptic. The next question was the location of the city vault, which the young man had been so intent on getting into lately. The girl didn't pay much attention to it, as the bank was robbed right after the apocalypse and all valuables were seized, and now it's just useless. However, the gold could have been hidden in the building where the Wild Sands gang used to be located. There was the largest bank in the city, and the money must have been kept there under heavy supervision. And if you consider that the gang of Wild Sands is a magnet impossible, it will indeed be very difficult for the young men to draw out all the gold that is there, if any. Wang Bing wasn't stupid enough to break eggs at me, so for the next few days, they stayed in the same place for the next few days, never going anywhere. Over the past few days, it was when I was able to see people passing by below, and they seemed to be members of the Tiger's Head. But since the building was surrounded by zombies and those people still didn't dare to approach it, much less think that anyone dared to live with the Walking Dead, it was also time for the young man to return to the real world in order to stock up on new supplies, as well as sell the treasures he found. Finally, open your backpack. The young man shows the girl food, drinks that he bought for her, shows how he will survive if he gives her all his supplies. Assuring that everything will be fine, he only asks the girl to accept these so-called gifts and hide in a safe place, waiting for him to come back. The young man's absence was supposed to last only 7 days, and so the girl shouldn't have worried, but only taken care of herself and waited for him to come back for her. 7 days is a long enough time for any actions and feelings. And during this time, the girl managed to become attached to the young man. Throwing herself on his neck, she began to embrace him tightly, and his heart began to beat faster, which the young man could feel with his own body. After spending many days and a week alone with the girl, it was difficult to let go of someone. KTT became quite close, even because of such a short period. But no matter how much the girl wants the young man to stay, he had to leave, but he kept assuring her that he would definitely come back. Looking into her eyes, he continued to hold her back, and also said that he would bring more delicious food when he returned. All he asked for was for the girl to take care of herself until he returned, so that they can share together what he will bring from the world of reality. In response, the girl only silently nodded her head, since it was quite difficult to say anything now. Emotions overwhelmed her to the brim. We gathered all our strength. The young man checked his things at the end, decided that it was time to move, though he didn't really want to leave either. He wasn't supposed to say where he was going back, but the last few days together had made him realize that the Shao were reliable and seemed to be an important person to him. Which is to say, he was the one who got her into trouble by getting involved with the Tiger Head gang. And so now he must take responsibility for the girl's safety. Behind the closed door, a girl sat with her back against the wall. An unknown feeling of emptiness settled inside. The young man kept looking at his phone, counting down the seconds until he returns. When he returns to the real world, then reselling jewelry and gold to return. When the clock showed 12, it was at that moment that the girl literally flew into his room, intending to say something last. Instead of the young man, she was met by the deafening silence and semi-darkness of the room, which forced the feeling of longing and sadness to return to the girl again. In the starlight and in the glow of the city, as the evening came into its own, young people sat on one of the benches in the park, and the evening was gaining momentum. The date would have been romantic enough if the cute girl hadn't come across some pervert in her companion. Deciding that sex on a bench is very exciting. The stars and planets where the girls were still favorable, as Van Ben appeared literally in the next bush. He shakes himself off. He turns around and sees this very young couple who are shocked, looks at him and apologizes for interrupting them. A breath of fresh air spreads through your lungs, an extraordinary sweetness after being in a post-apocalyptic world. It's like paradise. It's a really great feeling, especially when you consider that his backpack is now filled to the brim with gold and other gems. Initially, the young man wanted to call his girlfriend and tell her that he had already returned and that they were now extraordinarily rich. I dial a familiar phone number. He hears beeps. And when he is answered, he says that he misses him very much and wants to see him as soon as possible. The girl said that, of course, she was glad to see the young man, but she was now very busy with family affairs, so their meeting should be postponed. Hearing that the girl's family is choosing a new home, He offered his company and the role of advisor, wondering in which neighborhood the house they were looking at was located. The girl's acting skills earned her respect, as instead of her family, her companion was another man who cuddly hugged her waist. Turning to her companion, the girl hisses softly, telling him to leave, as she doesn't want Wang Bing to know about it. But the girl's companion does not back down and, leaning over to her ear, says that as soon as she opens her cards to the young man, he will help her with the down payment for the apartment. Then, at the end of the phone, the girl tells the address of the real estate office, where she will be waiting for the young man. This guy jumps victoriously for joy. Next on the list was to sell all the jewelry, the gold he had found to buy his beautiful girl villa and surprise her. Local pawn shops are famous for their extraordinary demand. All kinds of visitors come to it, offering even more versatile things. And now, when there is a sore throat all dirty, beaten and with a characteristic smell in front of the girl, I wonder where the manager is not even surprised. Only by covering her sensitive nose from the smell, she says that if he has any questions, he can talk to her and call the manager, who is not necessary for this. Despite the fact that the girl was not very pleased to deal with another poor student who came for financial assistance, she was still interested in what she needed. But if the young man had nothing worthwhile or important, then it was not worth interfering with the work and leaving as soon as possible. Let's start small. The young man forms one small pebble. The girl asks if she can look at it, estimating the cost. Without looking too much, the girl takes a pebble in her hand, asking if the young man knows something. He can call the police for counterfeit goods. Our stickers began to move, and other people began to move, and the girl kept shouting that the fearless young man was going to deceive her. If he did not leave the place immediately, she would call the guards. Turkey continues to persuade the woman that she should look more closely and not call him a liar, but even better, call someone who understands the matter better. The young man decided to go in search of a more worthwhile specialist than the girl himself, but he was stopped by one of the men. The man who approached turned out to be a manager and a first-class jeweler. Therefore, she suggested not to stir up a scandal and to make sure of the authenticity of the stone for yourself. Decide that there is nothing to lose. The young man forms a small red pebble for the man. I hope that at least he will be able to appreciate the value of it, having received the ready-made shining pebble. And the man is astonished, while the blonde girl continues to shout that this is a deception, nothing more. The manager yells at the girl to cover her mouth. Yes, she made tea for this gentleman, for he had brought them something very valuable. Here the gestures are even more silky than the man asks before. What is the young man's name, and offers to go to the VIP room to continue the conversation there. I continue to look at the young man, at the precious stone. The specialist asks again if he really wants to sell this stone. Everything was decided at the very moment when the young man first saw them. Therefore, he only asks to tell him the price. I hope that it will be high enough. The price for this jewel should be quite worthwhile to satisfy the young man, that he might in good conscience sell him the stone. No matter how sloppy the guy looked on the outside, he had the audacity inside to walk around with such a gem in complete peace. All the manager had to do was stay calm and talk less, lest the young man go elsewhere. Young man, choose exactly the same tactics. Keep silent and wait. But he worries why the man still hasn't named the price of the gemstone. But even if a person is in a panic, he should behave calmly, as this is a kind of psychological game. The endurance game went on. The man announced the initial price of 8 million, which was more than enough for such a jewel. On the outside, the young man looked calm and even-tempered, while the inner ones were all the cells of the body and jumped in joy from the announced prices. The manager has seen a lot of clients in his practice, and such calmness is not like a scarecrow. He decided that the price was too low and needed to be increased. He, averting any objection on the part of the gentleman, exclaimed that they would add another 500,000 to the announced price. He explained this price by the fact that in addition to selling stones, they have to pay not only for the design, and for processing, and personnel costs and various taxes. Emotions were raging inside the young man. He was about to say yes, as the man offered him another 500,000, damn 8.5 million. Putting down his can of Coke, he says that they have agreed. And if it weren't for the family's financial difficulties, he certainly wouldn't have sold the stone. The joy of a successful transaction, the manager casually asks what kind of family Mr. Wang comes from. Since his surname must belong to a noble family, it was not necessary for the man to know this. Besides, the family was not so famous, rich, so he decided to change the subject. As if by accident, he says that he has 9 more gems in his backpack by chance, and perhaps the man wants to buy them. He jumps for joy and literally hearts in his eyes. Because, of course, he needs them and he will gladly spend all his millions on them. Such valuable and profitable customers are always and everywhere appreciated, so the sweet, waving her hand goodbye, the manager says that she will be glad to see the young man again. Turning to his employee, the manager begins to scold her, as she almost broke a big deal with her character. Sitting in the car, the young man looked at the balance from his account, realized that now he had everything in chocolate in one fell swoop and so much money. The scheme was terribly simple. To sell everything found in parts in different places, the Adabs did not suspect him of something was wrong. The taxi driver asks where to take the young man. This one gives the address of the real estate company, which found out earlier. Still dirty but incredibly wealthy, the young man walked into his real estate company, but he still felt uncomfortable. It was the first time he had been in such an upscale place, and he had never thought that he would be able to get there before. But now everything has changed. Now he is another rich man. He will buy a villa
not only for his beloved, but also for his family. The young man's dreams are torn out of his thoughts, the voice of his girlfriend in turning around. He freezes in shock to see his beloved with another. A nice realtor asks how the couple is doing with this house, and a young man says that he has waited for everyday life, so he needs to deal with something. Come closer. The young man asks who this young man is next to his girlfriend and what is going on. The girl lowers her gaze. Her eyes run around a room. Her companion says that he will figure it out completely on his own. Bursting into mocking laughter, the young man asked the girl that she had been looking somewhere all the time and did not really want to tie her life to this beggar. Holding the young man by the chest, the girl asks him to calm down a little and not to talk about one being like that. Workers and visitors scurrying around began to gather around, because now something interesting was about to begin. Mistaking Wang for a migrant worker, people began to speculate about how he had been allowed inside in the first place. Didn't the guards miss it? Distracted from the standing hum around, the girl still utters those fateful words, which makes the young man even more shocked. For a young lady, a person with money and able to provide for her is more important. And if one loves her, he must back down. But the trouble is that he can also take care of the girl and her future. He went to another world for this, but the world is more cruel and the girl chooses the one who offers her more. Besides, she did not yet know about the young man's wealth. The girl's intentions were clear and unshakable. Initially, she wanted to resolve everything peacefully, but now it is clear that this will not work. The young man was more stern, saying that if one didn't shut up, he would break his fingers. Wang Bing was not one of the timid dozen who began to attack back, which made the girl even more nervous. They asked the young man to stop. The young man laughs again, realizing that the young man is more arrogant than he initially thought. Instead of hurling threats and empty words, Wang Bing lightly punches the young man in the chest. From the sharp pain and force of the blow, the man flies into the wall behind him. A shiver runs through my body, and plaster falls from the wall. Wang Bing keeps shouting, ready to strike again. The girl, on the other hand, screams in fright, because according to her plan, everything should be different. Turning around, the young man shouts at the girl, asking her to be quiet, as he no longer cares. He was hurt too badly. The sobering slap came just in time, otherwise there would be one more corpse in this world. The young man really needed to wake up and accept the fact that everything was over between them, the girl. And the fight he started is completely useless. She shouted that Mr. Lee was a more important person, and she doesn't want to stay with a man like Wang anymore. Running up to the young man, the girl fell to her knees in front of him, examining him for serious injuries. Life is truly merciless. And no matter how many years of relationships you have, the one who offers the most money wins. Just in time, a policeman was in the room. The realtor immediately reported that this stinky had to be arrested. In fact, in the current situation, it would be better if the young man voluntarily left the place and did not cause trouble. But so do need to serve guests, although he doesn't look like a guest, since the apartments here are expensive, and you can find them by their cover. The realtor believed that the external Hades speaks for a person, and if the boy does not drink for a year, he will not be able to collect such an amount. Looking uncomprehending, the young man asks again if this is the highest amount, since his budget is many times larger. A manager appears in the lobby. He is uncomfortable with the idea that the workers cannot cope with one young man. Wang Bing is still standing still, even though the workers look down on him. But his goal here is as clear as day. He wants to buy a house. The manager apologizes for his employees, and he says that this very minute he will solve all the problems of the young men. But if he's cheating and he doesn't have the money, he may have to call the police to deal with him. He had nothing to fear, and in fact he wanted to buy a house here. However, everything here is very low grade. That's why he's really not interested. The realtor girl was tired, screaming anger because the guy looked like a psycho and demanded to return the police, and the manager was just shocked by the impudence. Those present began to laugh at him, since the guy, apparently, was pretending that he simply could not afford to buy a house here. Ignore the people in the neighborhood, and the young men turned to their ex-girlfriend, saying that they hope she will not regret her decision. The young man was about to leave, but he is less deterred. I wonder at what price he is looking for a house, since there are ordinary houses. What they offer is not suitable for him. The young man knows his worth, and so the house is at least 20 million. The price should be right for him, but it is unlikely that he has any. And again the manager shouts to the horse that this guy is bragging too much. He will be satisfied with a house worth at least 20 million. The manager says that they certainly have something that will suit him. But if the young man is lying, he can easily take off his mask. The man explains that there is a newly built villa next to the Emerald Lake. But before buying it, shouldn't the young man show what he wants to buy for? Of course, there are no problems to show the remedy. However, the one who proves it will have unlimited power. If so, let the three who slandered and crawl on their knees. And while the young man can prove his worth, there is no problem in this, and the manager orders his employee and the police to fulfill the client's request. Everyone begins to talk to each other under the watchful eye of the young men. And he argues that, most likely, the manager just wants to bring the guy out into the open. They need to play along a little. The young man who was recently knocked out to you started shouting what kind of circus was going on here and why this person hadn't been taken out yet. He starts swinging his fists left and right, even hits his girlfriend and is already rushing towards the manager. His goal today was to show the young man who he was, so that the BAF would finally get the gist of what was happening. But instead of injuring his opponent, the young man himself is wounded in the face with a golden scroll. In such a high-class place, he should not be too smart, because you do not know from which moment a gold bar of gold or something more precious will always arrive. The manager of the establishment is shocked. Could it be that his eyes were not lying to him, and the young man had just struck the young man with a bar of gold? Managers have never seen such a large bar of gold. Probably, it is not real, visitors began to assume. While the young man was trying to get the bar back in his backpack, the girl fell on her knees in front of the young man, examining his wound. The girl is still young, and she will have enough time to learn to appreciate someone who really loves her. As for Wang Bing, she is unworthy. The young man turned on his heels, walked away, leaving the girl in the company of his almost unconscious companion. The restless realtor keeps shouting that this young man dared to hit their client again and should be grabbed immediately. She, the manager, only cares about the gold bar he just saw, and he cares even more about whether he is real or not, and besides, the young man finishes them off completely. Pick up your phone. He shows the balance of his bank account. They say it's just one of his accounts with the least amount of money. Just an incredible 70 million, so in his hands is also a gold bar. This young man is truly an incredible person. The realtor does not calm down, and now you assume that the young men are just playing a prank on them with some kind of photo, passing it off as reality. The manager falls at the feet of the young men, saying that from now on he is their most respected guest, and they will be glad if he spends his money with them. They say that their deal is certainly valid and he is ready to provide him with the best expensive villa. And it shocks the officer and the police officers even more. And then she turns to him, immediately forcing him to kneel down and apologize for his behavior in front of such an important client. In practice, this is probably the first time for all three young people that they have been asked to kneel and not just apologize. And also crawl around the hall 3 times. Countries and people have begun to nod approvingly that this guy is really very rich, which means that the gold bar is real. Standing next to the young man, the manager is obediently ready to serve him, asking if he is really satisfied. Does it take anything else to make him even happier? While those present watched the crawling of the manager and 2 policemen, the young man was informed that as soon as he was in the mood, they would definitely go and see the villa. To summarize everything that happened earlier, the young man bought a luxury villa worth 30 million yuan, and not in a fit of anger. Only because he needed a safe and secluded place. Standing under a cool shower, the young man discusses the need to prepare well for the next return. Since he's waiting for jewels and a beautiful girl. In the university park, friends in Wang speculated that after everything had happened, he hadn't even spoken to them. Still, they're glad he's broken up with Chin, and I was also worried that my friend did not answer either calls or messages, even though they've been cutting off his phone since morning. Looking at the phone again, one of the friends notices that he is receiving a message again that his account has been replenished with more than 1 million yuan. These scammers have already annoyed him. The author, a young man, received exactly the same message, and perhaps it's because of the site they were on last night that brightens up the gray everyday life. The best solution was to check in the banking app whether they really had such a great fortune. Entering a special bank approximation, both freeze in shock. Such a person was really looking for both of them were 1,000,001, but they did not understand how this could happen. Since none of them had won the lottery recently, they figured we'd call our friend to find out what was going on. First of all, however, his friends began to resent the fact that the young man did not even warn them of his disappearance and did not even dedicate to him the event that was happening in his life. The movements began to grumble that it was better for him to hide, since Mr. Or had a lot of connections, and it was better to contact them and wait somewhere safe. The young man didn't care. He was more interested in the question of whether his friends had received the money he had sent them, and they froze in shock, since they did not expect such a generous gift from him. But the young man says that it is still not enough, but he still hopes that his friends will accept this modest gift from him. As a payment for the money he used to take, his friends were still in shock, as the young man kept suggesting that 1 million was not enough, and it was not known what he was doing to say such a thing now. The friends stand there, not understanding what kind of lottery their friend won, and asks to honestly say how much he has earned, for which he replies that it is about 100 million. The young man said that the guys always helped him and lent him a helping hand. And that's nothing compared to this and the future. They still have a lot to do. The topic of conversation went in a completely different direction. The young men were also interested in the fact that he broke up with his girlfriend and beat her new boyfriend. Indeed, it is better to hide if he is so rich, but there is no need to worry about it, since the young man first drove them at home. And later, he will definitely treat his friends to drinks, life, or it can turn 180 degree, the most unexpected moment. Before, a young man worked part-time, was not busy with his studies to be with his girlfriend, but now it's completely different and he was finally able to come home. For such a long period of time to finally see my family, because Wang Bing had moved so suddenly, his parents were worried about him and thought that something had happened to him, so he had to visit them. A lie for good was told by the young man, so his parents believed that he had won a lottery ticket and therefore brought some of the money home. He didn't want to hide such things from his parents, but if he told him that he was in a post-apocalyptic world, and what happened there, they'd think he was schizophrenic. The place where he was born and raised, as well as his parents, are certainly important to him, but he didn't come here only. Therefore, there was another important person for him to meet. On the threshold of one of the houses, he is met by a tall middle-aged man, who is also interested in the young man, since it is not even the holidays, and he has already arrived. The young man made a small request. He decided to discuss it over a bottle of high-end young if the master of the house didn't mind, of course. Such politeness, of course, was alarming, and if the young man had something important, then why not say it right away, so as not to waste time? This man likes to go straight to the business of youth. He loved hunting. He had a gun and an air rifle at home, but things have changed a bit. The government has tightened the requirements for weapons in recent years. So Uncle Zhao rarely went hunting in the mountains. Therefore, he began to lead a more relaxed, moderate lifestyle. Not immediately. He received Wang Bing as his guest. He wonder can also do for him as a help. The young man's request was quite modest, as it was due to the circumstances. He needed to defend himself. He asked a knowledgeable person for an air pistol. It is logical that uncles do not come to uncles with such requests every day. And the first thought that the young man had gotten into something illegal flashed through his head and made him worry. But he didn't have to think about it, because he was a decent boy. And soon he will graduate from universities with his classmates. They have found a remote place for an internship. He just needs protection. The young man has heard that there are many small animals there, and they've just decided to go hunt them. And of course they're not going to do anything illegal. Of course, my uncle agreed to put down his weapons, but only on one condition, that as long as the young man did not use them in killing people, he would be calm. Leaving the young man sitting in the living room, the man went to find the necessary thing and instead of a pistol brought him a gun and ammunition. This is the first time the young man has held such a thing, a real rifle in his hands. It is powerful enough to kill an entire boar. Also, in addition to the patron and the uncle, our uncle offers her to take an anesthetic, intoxicants, as it is also a good way to hunt animals. But even with this seemingly innocuous remedy, you have to be terribly careful, so if you inhale too much, you can say goodbye to life. It was really interesting and useful. So the young man gladly accepted it. I think that in a post-apocalyptic world it can come in handy. Uncle once again remarks that they must not be seen, otherwise the weapons will be confiscated. And there will be a fine, or worse, a prison sentence, which, of course, the young man does not want. Events went on as usual. After the young man took an air pistol and left some money for his parents, he returned to the city to his new home. This time, he not only cooked enough food and bought a mobile phone, plus 10 fully charged batteries for Xiao to last for the next time he's gone. He was also fully armed. In addition to the weapons he had already bought 7 new heads and the machete. He also took the detonators that were used to blow up the mountains. One day in the modern world was equivalent to 7 days. It was post-apocalypse, and he doesn't know what happened to Xiao in those 7 days. It doesn't matter, but she hopes she hasn't been captured by the Tiger Head gang. The time for teleportation had arrived, and he stood ready for battle, waiting to find himself again in a virtual world full of dangers and the walking dead. The system sent a warning that a living person had been found 10 meters away from the specified place and whether the young man was sure that he wanted to go to this particular place, hoping it's Shao. And he said he definitely wanted to be there and had to teleport there, yes. Seconds later, he finds himself in the same room he disappeared from last time. I'm glad that I'm finally back, so the place is the same. A new plan was in his mind. He had to find his girlfriend and then find more jewels with her to bring into the real world. The girl sat in her room with the last pack of goodies. She was the only one left with her, and if she had known that this would happen, she would have saved a little more diligently. The girl was about to burst into tears, but suddenly Wan Bing jumped out from behind the bedroom door. They say that he has finally returned, as promised. And he brought even more goodies. If earlier the girl wanted to cry from sadness and the fact that the yummy food was over, now she cries with joy that the young man still returned and did not leave her alone. The guy is really embarrassed by such a reaction, so he did not expect that the girl would be so happy to see him and cry. Or maybe she didn't want him to come back and was crying because of that. All doubts fade into the background and a girl with eyes full of tears throws herself on the boy's neck. And talking about my fears and worries that I experienced all these days in anticipation, the young man, hugging the girl, in response to the miracle, had her back in the back of her head, saying that she is stupid. After all, he promised that he would come back, and of course he came back, as he always keeps his word. He asks her not to cry and to say that he has brought a lot of delicious and healthy things with him. And so they need to eat and talk about everything that happened in his absence. When your girlfriend notices the wounds on her body and immediately changes in her face, he asks what happened to her and where she hurt herself. During the young man's absence, the tiger head boss has apparently announced a reward for both of them, and now all the people in this world are hunting them. The girl was worried about her friend, so she periodically went outside to find out at least some information about him. I almost got into an ambush a couple of times. The young man stood digesting all the information. The girl didn't know how he left, but she risked her life for him. It really meant a lot to him. Turning to the girl, he pulls her closer to him, hugging her even harder. Yes, I went through quite a lot of events during these 7 days and must have been very afraid for his life. Holding the girl in his arms, the young man knew that he would make these people pay for hurting the girl, grind them to dust, and the whole gang. Xiao looked at the young man with her cheeks still blushing, for whom I was worried all these days, by which he told me what I had brought him many interesting things. He began to lay out his things, and the girls took her fancy to the Numat, which she immediately began to look at. And the young man talked about its power, firing range, and other functions. The young man told me how. And guns silently. And the girl can take it for self-defense. And I was even happier with something, because I had wanted something like this for a long time. He also had a lot of goodies on the table, enough for a month for the two of them. The girl immediately pounced on all these goodies. Because if it's a dream, she doesn't want to wake up. And if she wakes up, she has to eat as much as she can. Until then, everything was very tasty and the girl flew away one by one. But she also wondered why the young man himself only sat and watched and ate nothing. Resting his chin on his fist, he smiled sweetly. He liked the girl when she ate, and he wasn't hungry. Therefore, I just watched the picture in a touching way. Well, it was just as wrong that he had to eat at least something, since the girl could not so ruthlessly destroy all their supplies alone. The young man agreed with the girl. And, changing the subject, he pulled a new phone out of his pocket. They say that he brought it just for her. The young man also had 10 more charged batteries in his bag, which will last for a long time, so the girl can safely use her new device. It was all very touching, because no one has done anything like this for a girl for a long time. And even just to bring a delicious meal was already an act of many meanings for her as well. The girl was crying. The young man couldn't understand why, but all the parks were post-apocalyptic. Her parents had died, and no one treated her as well as they did. And now she has this guy in her life. Wan Bing still calmed her down, telling Xiao to cry better. They would listen to the music he brought. After she's had enough to eat, after a while, there was less and less food. There was also a clash between tigers and bears, but only a few people were injured. The few remaining people are also leaving the area, looking for a government colony to find refuge in, so now is the best time to go outside. The guys were practicing shooting. The young man mixed in that the Xiao had a sharp eye and she was good with weapons. You note that the power and range of the air gun are a little small. The girl reports that it will be quite difficult to shoot down a person at 50 m. But in fact, there is nothing wrong with that. Fired at close range, the gun will still be difficult to see. And there is no sound from the shot at all. But will the two of them be able to destroy the Tiger Head gang and the Wild Sands gang? This is an issue that needs to be discussed initially. Is the young man really 100% sure that they can win? Although there will be no battle between them, they may be able to force each other's gang leader to be killed. By the way, the wind gold is quite heavy in weight and no one needs it. It is probably still stored in the bank vault. So he also needs to enter the bank building and preferably together with the Wild Sands gang, to destroy them once and for all. His goal is to wreak havoc among the 4 gangs. And in this way, it will be easier for him to find a safe place to store gold, but there is a question of how exactly he will do this. Especially for this occasion, the young man brought with him a detonator from the real world, which he is going to use against groups. If he uses the detonator to blow up the warehouse of the Tiger Head gang, then their people will definitely blame it on the Bear gang and start a war. The idea was really magnificent, the boy himself was great, and it's called killing by someone else's hands. It makes the girl delighted. The only problem is that there must be a lot of guards in such a place in the warehouse. So it will be difficult for young people to look inside. It is worth thinking about. Well, as it turns out, there is no electricity in the evening and they go to bed at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And also the girl knows this place very well, as there are many passages and exits. They will not guard every entrance. So they can easily take advantage of one of them. In fact, it's very good. If everything is really as the girl said.
And then they are very lucky. The mission will be easier than we thought minutes earlier. This gang dared to persecute the young men, then they would have to know their wrath. This concludes the latest chapter, and we will be ending it here. I hope you enjoyed this recap. See you at the next one.